And so when I hear all of these attacks on democracy, like I see the attacks on democracy. I see the FBI. Remember that? Remember when whistleblowers were so sacrosanct that we couldn't even name their names? Now when we have whistleblowers out the wazoo coming out from the FBI under Joe Biden, all of a sudden we don't believe them. They're liars. They lose their job. They get fired. I noticed you haven't talked about that with Biden. All of these whistleblowers from the IRS and the FBI, Shapley, Ziegler, etc., that were demoted, fired, etc., because they didn't want to do like things like spy on fellow Americans at school board meetings. Do you think Merrick Garland's a yes man for Joe Biden?
No.
Why not?
What do you mean? Why not? Like, why is he?
Can you give us an example of where Merrick Garland has worked against Biden, or disagreed with Biden publicly, or overturned something that Biden said he wanted? Anything like that would be evidence that Rob here is wrong.
Well, he hasn't done. Well, okay. So, are we just talking about like any specific cases, essentially? Because
give us what you got. Yeah.
Well, for example, like at any point, Biden could actually have him like have Merrick Garland reach out to drop the investigation into his son, Hunter Biden. That has not happened, actually. As a matter of fact, the Department of Justice is actually investigating other Democrats. They're allowing his son to go through his investigations and whatnot. Biden at any time could say, hey, can you do me this favor and, just have all these charges dropped. He hasn't done any of that. Merrick Garland is continuing to do his job in the Department of Justice, and he's following suit with that. So I would say he's definitely not a yes man.
Well, that's not true. So one, it is technically true that Biden could snap his fingers. He could pardon them, right, if he wanted. Mm-hmm. The problem is it would look bad for him politically to do so right now. And it would certainly look bad politically. And so when you're looking at the end goal of maintaining political power, although it's true that technically a president, which is funny because you're misrepresenting the idea that Trump has immunity, right? It is a constitutional argument as to whether or not you could criminally prosecute a president. It's not one that I'm in favor of, but it's not as ridiculous as people are saying, because the argument then becomes, well, then can we go back for the crime of, say, murder and charge Barack Obama for the extrajudicial killing of an American citizen overseas, which happened? Are we allowed to charge him? And there seems to be a scholarly argument like there has to be some sort of threshold that says like probably not a good idea to charge presidents 60 years in the past for stuff like that. Now, maybe that differentiates for like some crime you committed, like, cocaine usage or something like that that's outside the scope. But that's sort of the judicial argument that's being brought forth. That's sort of an aside. Anyways, the point is, no, it's not feasible to do what you're suggesting. Instead, what we see is Merrick Garland acting as the weaponization of the Biden administration, literally going after whistleblowers, parents at school board meetings, groups like Moms for Liberty, going after members of the press, going after pundits that are on the other side. And even when it comes to the Hunter Biden case, what we see is we have whistleblowers that repeatedly had to come out and say that the Hunter Biden investigation was intentionally sabotaged from the get-go. And then only when a judge spoke up about the sweetheart deal that Merrick Garland's DOJ tried to give Hunter Biden did they end up getting pie on their face, and they had to charge him with anything. And so they specifically chose to charge him with the one crime that couldn't be connected to Democrats or to Joe Biden, which was the crime of being high while having a gun, actually the one crime that I think shouldn't have been prosecuted, as opposed to the litany of obvious tax and FARA violations, because had he been charged with those, the question would have been, Hunter Biden was illegally lobbying to who? And the answer, of course, is his father, which is why Merrick Garland's making sure those charges aren't brought.
Indulge me for a moment. Do you think Trump should pardon or promise to pardon Hunter Biden?
No. I think Trump should. I think
even though
Trump
you think
should,
that the charge brought against him was bullshit, and the one he was convicted for, at least,
I think that most
bullshit.
of the charges, I think almost all the charges brought against Trump are bullshit, and it's just like cancel culture. We told the left over and over again, if you keep going down this road, things will get ugly. The left didn't care, and so now the only tool effective to fighting the left is to engage in cancel culture from the right. The same is true with lawfare. Until Democrats face the same consequences that they have weaponized against their opponents, it will not end.
Well, I really want to. I want to challenge on that. You said that Merrick Garland went after parents at parent-teacher conferences. I actually looked into that. Mm-hmm. Ted Cruz made this false assertion that that's exactly what happened. That wasn't the case. The reason why they did an investigation into parents at parent-teacher conferences is because there were school administrators, there were superintendents, there were teachers that were being threatened and beaten. You're obviously going to have to investigate a situation like this. Now, they spoke to all the school districts and all the attorneys general and whatnot. And they basically went through the process and say, hey, listen, we're not going to target people about this. Now, they kind of like expanded upon like that memorandum, essentially saying, listen, we're not calling people terrorists, essentially. We just want to make sure that parents aren't calling, because this is a common occurrence. There are parents that are threatening school board members. There are parents that are threatening to bomb libraries and stuff like that, all because of books, essentially. That's a dangerous situation, and you have to take those situations seriously. Wouldn't you agree to that?
No, I don't agree. I think you're misrepresenting this. I'll tell you. I think you're misrepresenting the situation. So let's start at a baseline. One, would you agree there are things that we could consider crimes or inappropriate behavior that don't rise to the level of the FBI getting involved?
Threats, I definitely, especially like, terrorist, not terrorist like this, but like dangerous threats that could involve
Can
like
you give
harm.
us an example of one real quick, just so we know what we're talking about?
Me?
No, Rob, you said, do you think that there are threats that could...
For example,
can you give us an example of when you think you shouldn't rise to the level?
Sure.
Yeah,
there's a brawl at a football game outside of high school. Should the FBI get involved?
No.
Okay, right. So what was the rationale when Merrick Garland was in front of Congress and he signed off on that memorandum? What was the evidence he gave? Because you're saying a bunch of stuff here. I want you to give me the evidence that Merrick Garland gave in front of Congress why he signed that memorandum. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got to pull it up real quick. So from what I understand, like...
he said two things.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you if you want me to.
Okay.
And you could say if you disagree. He said, one, the letter that was sent from the National School Board Association, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the one that said, use the Patriot Act, the one I'm talking about, right? That said these were domestic terrorists, these parents. Correct? Yeah. That's one. That's what the letter said from the National School Board Association, to use the tools of the Patriot Act, correct?
Garland's member never labeled parents speak at school as domestic terrorists. That I'm looking at it right now.
That's not what my question was. My question was, when Garland was asked, why did you put this memorandum out in front of Congress? He testified in front of Congress. You acknowledge that, right? He was asked, what was your reasoning for this? He gave two answers. The one was this letter that came from one of the National School Board Associations, correct?
Yeah, just
and that letter said that they should use the Patriot Act to treat them like domestic terrorists, correct?
But they weren't treated as domestic terrorists, though.
That's I understand, but you're what you're doing is you're saying, but Garland said don't treat them as terrorists. I'm saying that was one of the rationales. This letter said treat them like terrorists. That was one of the rationales, correct? That letter.
From the National School Board,
okay,
right?
You don't have to answer. That's fine if you can't answer. The other rationale that Merrick Garland gave in sworn testimony in front of Congress was, and I'm quoting, news reports that I heard. When he was asked what specific reports, he couldn't give a specific report. That means the only indicative evidence that we have is this letter from the National School Board Association. Now, you're right that this letter did cite examples of violence and crimes. Here, I looked into this too. Okay, here's some of the examples they used, right? They said that there was a school board meeting where people were yelling Nazi slogans. Whoa, sounds bad, right? A bunch of Nazis.
I think Moms for Liberty was doing the Nazi slogans. I don't know about the PTAs, though.
Well, the reason they cited a specific school that this happened on, the Nazi slogans was not people endorsing Nazis, but calling the school board that had locked down the school and forced kids into masks Nazis. They said, you're being a bunch of Nazis. So that was one. Then it cited a couple other examples like that, people that were just yelling mean things, not threats, just mean things. And then it cited two acts of violence. There were two crimes. One was a school board member left and someone chased them down and punched them. Hands down, assault, no question here. I don't think one assault's reason for the FBI to get involved. Would you agree?
Sure, that's fair.
Okay. The other example it gave was the story, and I'm going to forget this, I believe it was Loudoun County, Virginia, where a man was arrested for disorderly conduct and some other things. Want to know why he was arrested? You see, his daughter was raped by a trans student in a bathroom. And then he went to the school board meeting where other parents were furious about the incident, and the principal lied and said there was no sexual assault. And this dad was furious and started cursing and swearing and screaming and was escorted out and arrested for doing that, which the charges were later dropped. That, to my knowledge, is the two examples of criminal activity that Merrick Garland used as the basis for this memorandum. I'm happy for you to show me any other examples that Merrick Garland cited. I'll give you the floor right now. Give me any examples of violence or criminal activity that Merrick Garland cited, other than you generally saying, well, parents were getting mean. They were saying mean shit. Can you give me any specific examples?
As he looks for them? Oh, go ahead. If you have them all.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Keep going. No, you're good.
Okay. So just for my audience's clarity thing. So is your accusation here, Rob, that Merrick Garland used the force of the government in order to prosecute these people? Is this what we're claiming?
Investigate. In fact, several of the FBI, at least one of the FBI whistleblowers said the reason he decided to blow the whistle was because, contrary to we haven't even got to how it was actually implemented, was that he was basically told to sit outside school board meetings and spy on these parents.
Sure. How many people were arrested by the FBI, by Merrick Garland?
Not sure if anywhere. There were some that were investigated. For example, Moms for Liberty was investigated using the same tools that we investigate other domestic terror organizations. But it's sort of irrelevant to the question of weaponizing the FBI to spy on groups that you consider your political opponent. For example, let me ask you, Wick or Alex, right? Had Donald Trump had Bill Barr come out and say, we think that anti-immigration, or we think that anti-ICE groups are a danger. They attack several ICE facilities. And so now we're going to have the FBI work with local law enforcement to monitor any time that there is a protest of people protesting our immigration status. Do you think that's something that Democrats would have accepted? They would have said, oh, fair enough. There were attacks at ICE facilities. Do you think they would, or would they have said, this is Trump destroying democracy. He's weaponizing the FBI and the DOJ to go after people that are his political opponents? Because that's how we got in this conversation. We're talking about attacks on democracy, correct?
Sure. Let's let Alex answer. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I missed one because I had to look up this.
Okay, I'll rephrase. I'll say it again.
I'm sorry.
He's asking you if, right, something similar had happened with ICE facilities and things like that. You know what? Instead of me steel manning it, Rob repeats.
Yeah,
so
I'll do it in 10 seconds. Yeah. There were a bunch of groups that hated immigration, right? ICE. They attacked ICE facilities. Imagine that Trump had Bill Barr come out and say, we're going to, anytime there's an immigration protest, we're going to have the FBI cooperate with local law enforcement to look into them. How do you think Democrats would have responded to that?
So just make sure I have this clear, okay? I just want to make sure I have this 100% clear. Are you talking about like physical attacks upon like ICE facilities and whatnot?
Yes, that you'll acknowledge that happened, correct?
If attacks happen on ICE facilities, that's different because that's a government institution essentially.
But you acknowledge that did happen.
Oh no, I think he got it. I think he got.
Well, for those listening, it did happen. There's actually footage of them pulling down the
Okay. Am I good?
Yeah.
You're good. You're good.
Where did you lose me at?
We're still waiting for your.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure. That it was clear that if facilities were in fact attacked by people, right, and sending out like law enforcement to investigate people that assault ICE facilities, right?
That's not the question. The question is they use that as a precursor to say we're going to put out a memorandum that says the FBI is going to be cooperating with law enforcement to monitor all protests against ICE, even those that didn't result in violence. Going forward, because there was violence at this one, now we're going to monitor all of these people. You think that would have been acceptable?
If I'm going to remain consistent, yes, I would actually.
Would you think honestly, Democrats would have said that was an attack on democracy?
Probably not.
Yes, they would have. They certainly would have. And they would have been right to complain.
So.
Okay, you have those examples?
The only thing that I can see is like 5 days after receiving the NSBA letter, Garland issued a memo citing a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, threats of violence against school administrators, board members, teachers, and staff who participate in the vital work of running our nation's public schools. So as far as like any like actual cases, that's about all there is.
Yeah, he didn't have it. So I watched the entire hearing and I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked that Garland he didn't even have a clue. He was like, yeah, some news reports. And they're like, can you give us an example? Like, what was the news report that you heard? I mean, you're literally talking about using the FBI to monitor people at school board meetings. So surely the rationale from this has to be beyond reproach. We had very specific evidence that XYZ was going to occur. But instead, he's just like, well, and they actually came back, if I'm not mistaken, that National School Board Association rescinded the letter. Because they're like, our bad, this letter was overly hostile language, blah, blah, blah. And so if you take the letter portion out of it, and even the National School Board Association is like, we no longer want to stand by that letter. What was the rationale? And again, then we have whistleblowers from the FBI saying, We're treating these people with the same watch list that we're treating domestic terrorists. I was literally, the one guy that spoke at the committee said he was like, when he decided to become a whistleblower, he's literally sitting in a parking lot of a school board meeting, spying on parents over the flimsiest of rationales. And the reason was because these people were seen. It's the same reason that there were so many attacks all over the place, particularly on people that were upset about COVID policy, right?
Now finish
ahead,
your
Wick.
point. But now I have a question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Sure. So I'm just trying to get at the actual complaint here. Would you let me give you a hypothetical, okay? So there are reports. You get a bunch of reports from randos, just civilians, right? Saying, "Hey, there's this pro-Palestine protest that's going around, and we've heard some shit, right? We think they may be planning something. This is kind of scary. What do you think that the FBI or the police or whatever should do in that situation? Should they just not look into it because it's not because it's so wishy-washy?"
If there's specific evidence that suggests a specific incident occurring, of course I don't have a problem with the FBI looking into it. What I would have a problem would be, and I say this as someone who doesn't really have a love for the pro-Palestinian protesters. My take on Israel-Palestine's a little,
right?
it's a little, I don't think we should be involved at all. I dislike both sides, to put it bluntly, right? But I have no skin in the game for the pro-Palestinian protesters. I would have found it to be outrageous if the Biden administration, if Garland put out a memo that said, well, we heard that there was going to potentially be some sort of bad incident, so the FBI will be monitoring every pro-Palestinian protest. I would say that's outrageous. Just like I said, and I'm consistent on it, I found the treatment of Muslims after 9/11 to be outrageous. That there were mosques that our government was spying on, that there was no evidence whatsoever to suggest that these... Now, if you have specific evidence that this specific mosque is involved, that's a different question. But to just generally say, well, we're labeling this entire group of people, and it's these sorts of erosion of rights, if you don't stick up for the people you disagree with, right, that it snowballs. That's how we ended up with the Patriot Act. And so when I hear all of these attacks on democracy, like I see the attacks on democracy. I see the FBI. This is just one incident. We could talk about whistleblowers. The Biden administration and the Obama administration collectively have gone after more whistleblowers than every other administration combined. No one said shit when Obama did it.
Let me ask you, Alex.
Yes.
Because I have a question for you on this
Sure.
as well, right? So let's just, for the sake of argument, say that Rob is completely correct here, that there was no basis. What should Merrick Garland, or if Merrick Garland didn't put a stop to it? So it's not just that he didn't go along with it, but he didn't stop it from happening. Do you think that that's at least a black mark on his record? If he knew about these incidents that were going on, where the FBI was, and again, we're just ceding to the argument for the sake of the hypothetical.
Sure.
Rob's entirely correct here, that they were violating people's rights by going and extrajudiciously spying on these people, and then Merrick Garland knew about it. Do you not think it's a black mark, at least on his record, that he didn't put the stop to it?
Yeah, I would say so. If I'm going to be perfectly honest.